There is a silence that is not peace. It is the silence of a house where the floorboards have been eaten away from beneath, invisibly by termites. From the outside, the structure stands, the paint is fresh, the windows are clean. But inside, a catastrophic collapse is not a possibility. It is an inevitability. There is a weight in the soul that is not conviction. It is the exhaustion of holding up a facade, of performing a faith you fear is no longer holding you. You feel it, don't you? A quiet dread. A cold distance where once there was warmth. A creeping hollowness in the words of prayers that used to feel like breathing. You have been warned your entire life about the loud sins, the great crashing transgressions that leave wreckage in their wake, the murders, the thefts, the adulteries. And so you guard the front door of your soul, ever, vigilant against these obvious invaders. But what if I told you the real threat was never at the front door? What if the deadliest enemies to your faith are already inside? Not as invaders, but as welcome guests, as cherished habits, as ideas you were taught to treasure as virtues. What if the things quietly destroying your connection to the divine are not your great failings, but your most pious-looking successes? Today, we are not here to talk about the sins that lead to damnation. We are here to uncover something far more subtle, and perhaps more tragic, the sins that lead to a dead faith, the slow, silent poisons that calcify the heart and sever the raw, living nerve of communion with God. We will name 5 of them, and as we journey through ancient texts and timeless truths, you may find that what you feared was a sign of your failure is actually an invitation into a faith more honest, more resilient, and more profoundly alive than you have ever dared to imagine. So, take a breath. Let the silence in the room be one of anticipation, not dread. Our excavation begins now. What is the first guest we have welcomed, that we must now unmask as a saboteur? It is the idol we have built and called wisdom. It is the sin of certainty. Imagine a fortress. Its walls are sheer, polished, and impossibly high. Not a single stone is out of place. It is perfect. It is impenetrable. This is the faith many of us have been taught to build, a fortress of correct answers. A theological system where every question has a pre-approved response, every mystery is neatly solved, and every doubt is a traitor to be executed on sight. We memorize the verses. We learn the apologetics. We stand on our walls, armed with logic and doctrine, and we feel safe. We feel strong. We feel certain. And this certainty feels like a virtue. It feels like the very definition of faith. But this fortress is made of glass. And the first stone of genuine, unanswered suffering, the first gust of a mystery that defies our neat formulas, is all it takes to shatter the entire structure into a million glittering shards, leaving us exposed, wounded, and betrayed by the very thing we thought would protect us. This is the sin of certainty. It is the arrogant belief that we can map the mind of God, that our finite temporal understanding can fully contain the infinite. It is the subtle pride that whispers, "I have it right," and therefore they must have it wrong. It fosters a spirit of judgment, not compassion. It creates disciples who are excellent debaters, but poor listeners. It values being correct over being kind. It closes the heart to new revelation and turns a dynamic, living relationship into a static, gusty museum of facts. Think of Job, a righteous man, shipwrecked by inexplicable tragedy. His friends arrive armed with their fortresses of certainty. "You must have sinned," they declare, one after another, each with his own perfectly logical, theologically sound reason for Job's suffering. They had all the answers, and in the end, God does not commend them. He rebukes them. He calls their counsel a darkening of wisdom with words that lack knowledge. They spoke about God, but they did not speak rightly. And Job, in his agony, he tore down his own fortress. He railed, he questioned, he demanded an audience with the Almighty. He abandoned the pretense of having the answers and stood naked in the raw, terrifying honesty of his unknowing. And when God finally speaks, what does he do? He does not give Job a PowerPoint presentation. explaining the celestial mechanics of his suffering. He does not hand him a theological treatise. He unleashes the whirlwind. He unleashes a torrent of questions, not answers. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Do you give the horse its strength? In the face of this overwhelming, majestic, untamable mystery, Job's need for answers simply dissolves. He doesn't receive an explanation, he receives a presence, and his response is the antidote to the sin of certainty. My ears had heard of you, he whispers, but now my eyes have seen you. He trades his knowledge about God for an encounter taught with bod faith, you see, is not the absence of doubt. True biblical faith, the Hebrew word sotamuna sot, is not intellectual agreement with a set of propositions. It is trust. It is steadfastness. It is the courage to walk into the mist, holding a hand you cannot see. It is the peace of knowing that it is okay to not know, because you sont known sought by the one who does. The sin of certainty builds a cage of answers and traps God inside. The grace of unknowing sets you free to walk with him in the wild, open spaces of mystery where real relationship happens. So, I ask you to look at your own fortress. Are its walls getting higher? Is your first instinct to correct or to connect? Do you fear the questioner, or do you see in their doubt a sacred wrestling, a mirror of Job, an honest heart that God will meet not with condemnation, but with a holy whirlwind of his presence? Letting go of certainty is not an act of intellectual surrender. It is an act of profound spiritual courage. It is the beginning of a faith that cannot be shattered, because it is no longer built on the glass of our own understanding, but on the bedrock of a relationship with the mysterious, untamable, and endlessly loving God. From the cold fortress of certainty, we now travel to a place that feels warmer, more communal, yet is perhaps even more dangerous. It is a hall of mirrors where every reflection whispers a judgment. It is the place where our sacred personal journey becomes a public soul-crushing competition. This is the second quiet sin, the sin of spiritual comparison. You know this place. You visit it every day. You hold it in your hand. It is the endless scroll of curated perfection. You see a friend's post about their early morning quiet time, the beautiful lighting on their open Bible, the perfectly crafted prayer in the caption, and a small cold stone drops into your stomach. Conti didn't do that today. I overslept. My prayers feel clumsy. Asterisk, you see a family from your church, smiling, harmonious, seemingly floating on a cloud of divine favor. And you think of the argument you had with your spouse this morning, the difficult child, the secret anxieties you carry. Tate are so blessed. What am I doing wrong? Asterisk, this hall of mirrors isn't just on your phone. It's in the pews. You hear someone pray with soaring, articulate eloquence, and your own simple, fumbling words feel childish. You hear of another's ministry, their acts of service, their profound spiritual insights, and your own quiet, often unseen walk with God feels small, insignificant. This is the sin of spiritual comparison, and it is a two-headed beast. On one hand, it breeds despair. We look at others, and we feel less than. We feel spiritually inadequate, lazy, unloved by God. Our faith becomes a frantic effort to keep up, to perform, to earn a spiritual status that seems to come so easily to others. The joy of our own unique walk with God is stolen, replaced by the crushing burden of a race we can never win. Because the finish line is always someone else's highlight reel. But there is another head to this beast, one that is even more subtle and far more venomous. It is pride. Because sometimes in that hall of mirrors, we look at others and we feel more than. We see someone struggling with a sin we feel we have conquered. We see someone whose theology seems simpler, less refined than our own. We see someone whose worship is less expressive or too expressive for our tastes. And a quiet, dark satisfaction settles in our hearts. We thank God that we are not like Thantham Bot, and in that moment we become the Pharisee in the temple, boasting of our own righteousness, blind to the humble tax collector beside us, whose simple, honest plea for mercy is the only prayer that truly reaches heaven. Spiritual comparison, whether it leads to despair or to pride, does the same thing. It hijacks your relationship with God and makes it about other people. It turns the sacred, intimate space between your soul and its creator into a public arena. It replaces grace with metrics. It replaces love with envy. It replaces community with competition. Let's leave the hall of mirrors and walk into a field at dusk. The air is warm. The sky is turning purple. The landowner is here, and he is paying his workers. This is the scene Jesus paints for us in the Gospel of Matthew. Some workers have been toiling all day under the brutal sun. Others were hired only in the last hour. And the landowner, he pays them all the same wage, a full day's pay, and those who worked all day are furious. It isn't fair. Their complaint is not about what they received. They received exactly what they were promised. Their rage is born from a single toxic act. They looked at their neighbor's reward. They compared. The landowner's response cuts to the very heart of this sin. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me, or are you envious because I am generous? The parable isn't a lesson in labor economics. It is a breathtaking revelation about the economy of grace. God's grace is not a limited resource. His love for someone else does not diminish his love for you. His blessing on their life does not mean there is less blessing available for yours. The problem in the vineyard was not the wage, it was the measurement. The moment the workers began to compare, their joy vanished. The gift they had received was poisoned by what they felt others did not deserve. When you compare your spiritual walk to another's, you are standing with the grumbling workers in the vineyard. You are questioning the radical, scandalous generosity of the landowner. You are implying that grace should be logical, that it should be earned, that it should be fair by human standards. But the whole point of grace is that it is not fair. It is a gift. The Apostle Paul, a man who had every right to boast of his spiritual resume, gave us the way out. In his letter to the Galatians, he says, "Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else." Your work, your path, your unique, unrepeatable, bespoke relationship with the Creator of the cosmos. God is not mass, producing disciples. He is hand, crafting souls. Your journey, with all its unique struggles, its peculiar joys, its seasons of silence and its moments of song, is a masterpiece in progress. To compare it to another is to insult the artist. So, what is the way to peace? It is to deliberately, consciously, pull your gaze away from the hall of mirrors and to fix it on the landowner. It is to cultivate a spirit of gratitude, not just for what he has given you, but for his generosity to others. It is to learn to celebrate the blessings of your brother or sister, not as a reflection of your own lack, but as further evidence of the boundless, extravagant love of the God you both serve. Let go of the spiritual yardstick. Your path is not their path. Your story is not their story. And the grace that meets you on your path is measured for you, and you alone, with a love that is infinite, personal, and utterly beyond comparison. We have escaped the cold fortress of certainty and the dizzying hall of spiritual comparison. Now, we must venture into the heart of the matter. We arrive at a sin so subtle, so deeply embedded in our modern understanding of faith, that it feels like breathing. It doesn't look like a sin at all. It looks like the very core of the gospel, but its misinterpretation is the termite in the floorboards. It is the quietest and perhaps the most devastating of them all. This is the sin of trivialized grace. What do I mean by this? Think about how we often treat grace. It has become a cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card, a divine clean-up crew that follows behind us, sweeping away our messes so we can go on and make more. We sin. We say a quick, perhaps even sincere, "Sorry, God." We feel the relief of forgiveness, the wiping clean of the slate. And then we go on largely unchanged, knowing that the safety net of grace will be there the next time we fall, and the next, and the next. This cycle feels normal. It feels like the Christian life. But what if this very cycle is hollowing out our faith from the inside? It makes sin feel cheap. If forgiveness is instant and automatic, with no real cost or consequence to our inner being, then the act of sinning loses its weight. It becomes a regrettable mistake, an oopsie, not a wound to our own soul and a grief to the heart of God. And even more tragically, it makes grace feel cheap. Grace becomes a simple transaction, a divine pardon, rather than the most powerful transformative force in the universe. It becomes a sterile legal declaration, not a fiery, creative power that resurrects dead things. This is the sin of trivialized grace, and it is the central reason why so many of us feel spiritually stuck. We are caught in a loop of sin, confess, repeat, because we have fundamentally misunderstood the purpose of grace. Remember the title of this journey, The 5 Small Sins That Are Quietly Destroying Your Faith. This misunderstanding, may be the engine driving all the others. It is the master key that unlocks a faith that is either stagnant or dynamic and alive. The Bible uses a very specific word for repentance. In the Greek, it is tot metanoia sot. Our modern translations often render this as to repent, which we have come to associate with simply feeling sorry or asking for forgiveness. But this is a pale shadow of the original meaning. Dat metanoia satui means to change one's mind, but not just to change an opinion. It means a complete reorientation of your entire being. A fundamental shift in the way you see the world, yourself, and God. It's a revolution of the soul. It is not just turning sot away side from sin, it is turning sot toward something or someone else. It is an exchange of your broken self, destructive way of being for a new, whole God-breathed way of being. Now think about grace in this context. Grace is not just the forgiveness that makes sot metanoia sot possible. Grace is the sot power that makes sot metanoia tot happen. It is the divine energy that fuels the transformation. It is the hand of God reaching into your life, not just to pardon you, but to remake you. Let's make this real. Forget the abstract theological terms. Let's look at a man up a tree, Zacchaeus. A chief tax collector, a man who was the embodiment of greed and injustice. He was a traitor to his own people, wealthy from his extortion. Jesus comes to town, and this man, despised by all, climbs a sycamore tree just to get a glimpse. And Jesus looks up and says, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." Notice what happens next. Jesus doesn't say, "Zacchaeus, you must repent of your greed." He doesn't say, "Apologize for all the people you've cheated." He simply offers him presence. He offers relationship. He offers grace, embodied and sitting at his dinner table. And what is Zacchaeus' response to this encounter with grace? It is dot metanoia sot, spontaneous, explosive, life, altering transformation. He stands up and declares, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." His encounter with grace didn't just make him feel forgiven. It fundamentally changed him. It rewired his heart. The greed was replaced by generosity. The injustice was replaced by a passion for restitution. That is the work of true grace. It doesn't just clean the slate, it gives you a new heart with which to write a new story. So when we treat grace as a simple get-out-of-jail-free card, we are robbing it of its power. We are settling for a pardon when what is on offer is a resurrection. The Apostle Paul screamed this at the Roman Church. "What shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may increase? By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer?" We have misunderstood the goal. The goal is not to get better at asking for forgiveness. The goal is to be so transformed by the power of grace that the sin that once held us captive begins to lose its appeal, its power. It is to become, day by day, a person who is more like Christ. This is not about striving for perfection in your own strength. That is a dead end. This is about positioning yourself to be transformed. It is about seeing every moment of failure not as an occasion for a quick, cheap apology, but as a desperate, honest cry for deeper transformation. It is to pray not just, "God forgive me," but "God change me." Rewire my desires. Heal the broken part of me that runs to this thing. Fill me so completely with your presence that there is no room left for it. Do you see the difference? One is a life of managing sin. The other is a life of pursuing transformation. One leads to exhaustion and cynicism. The other leads to hope, to genuine change, and to a faith that is vibrant and alive. Because it is powered by the same grace that parted the Red Sea and rolled the stone away from the tomb. Do not settle for a trivial grace. Dare to believe in a grace that is wild, powerful, and utterly transformative. It is not a safety net. It is the wind that will fill your sails and carry you to shores you cannot even imagine. From the awesome, terrifying power of true grace, we now turn inward to the quiet, hidden chambers of the heart. We come to a place many of us have been taught is off limits to God. A place of darkness and pain we believe we must clean up ourselves before we can present it to the light. This brings us to our fourth quiet sin, a sin of pious suppression. This is the sin of muzzling your lament. There is a pervasive, unwritten rule in many of our spiritual communities. It is the tyranny of the positive, the pressure to be perpetually joyful, victorious, and triumphant. We sing songs of praise, we share testimonies of victory, we speak the language of blessing. And these things are good and beautiful. But where, in all of this, is the room for our pain? Where is the space for our grief, our confusion, our anger, our profound disappointment with God and with life? When tragedy strikes, when prayers go unanswered, when doubt rolls in like a thick fog, we are often met with well-meaning but soul-crushing platitudes. Just have more faith. God has a plan. Count your blessings. The implicit message is clear. Your negative emotions are a failure of faith. Your sorrow is a spiritual weakness. Your anger at God is blasphemy. And so, we learn to muzzle ourselves. We silence the screams of our own hearts. We put on a brave, smiling mask for our church community, while inside, we are drowning in a sea of unspoken grief. We approach God with polite, sanitized prayers, carefully editing out the raw, messy, ugly truth of what we are really feeling. We believe we are being reverent. We believe we are being faithful, but we are committing the sin of muzzling our lament. And this sin creates a catastrophic disconnect between our true selves and our spiritual lives. It forces us to live an inauthentic existence, pretending to be fine when we are falling apart. And it builds a wall between us and God, because true intimacy is impossible without total honesty. We are presenting a false self to God and wondering why we feel so distant from Him. Now, I want you to open the biblical songbook, open the Psalms, and listen. What you will find there will shock you if you have been living under the tyranny of the positive. A vast portion of the Psalms are not songs of praise. They are songs of raw, unfiltered, gut-wrenching lament. Listen to the psalmist in Psalm 88, considered by many to be the darkest chapter in the entire Bible. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I call to you, Lord, every day. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? The psalm ends there. No tidy resolution, no sudden burst of praise, just raw, open-ended darkness offered up to God. Or listen to David, the man God Himself called a man after my own heart. In Psalm 22 he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. This is not the polite prayer of a man trying to be proper. This is a scream, an accusation. He accuses God of being distant, of being silent, of abandoning Him. And these words were not edited out of the Bible. They were canonized. They were preserved for thousands of years as part of the inspired Word of God. Why? Because God is not afraid of your darkness. He is not offended by your anger. He is not fragile. He can handle the full force of your grief, your rage, your despair. The Bible does not just permit lament. It gives us a language for it. The entire book of Lamentations is a structured, poetic expression of national grief and complaint against God. Job, as we saw, rails against God. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, curses the day he was born. And most profoundly of all, whose words did Jesus Christ himself cry out from the cross in his moment of ultimate agony? He reached back to the songbook of his people, and he pulled forth the words of David, the words of lament, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In his darkest hour, Jesus did not muzzle his lament. He gave it voice. To bring your pain to God, to scream your questions, to hurl your anger and your broken heart at his feet is not an act of faithlessness. It is an act of profound faith. It is a defiant declaration that you believe he is real enough to hear you, big enough to handle you, and loving enough to stay with you in the darkness. It is saying, I am in hell right now, and you are the only one I can tell. I will not pretend with you. I will be real with you because I believe you are the only one who can save me. The sin of muzzling your lament is rooted in a fear that your authentic self is too much for God. But the peace of God is found in the breathtaking discovery that he desires all of you. The happy you, the sad you, the angry you, the doubting you. Authentic communion is a full contact sport. It is messy, it is noisy, and it is real. So, unmuzzle your heart. Take that unspoken grief, that hidden anger, that deep disappointment, and give it to him. Not in polite, edited phrases, but in the raw, unfiltered language of your own soul. You will not be met with judgment. You will be met with the presence of a God who is not a distant, stoic king, but a weeping father, the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, who meets you in your pit and sits with you in the darkness until the morning comes. And it will come. We have journeyed far. We have seen how the desire for certainty can build a prison, how comparison can steal our joy, how trivialized grace can stagnate our souls, and how silenced lament can create a life of painful inauthenticity. Now, we arrive at our final destination, a sin that masquerades as justice, that feels righteous, but which acts as a spiritual poison for which there is only one costly antidote. This is the fifth and final quiet sin, the sin of the unforgiving servant's heart. Someone has wronged you, deeply. Their words or actions have left a scar on your soul. The wound is real, the injustice is undeniable, and in the secret chambers of your heart you hold on to it. You replay the event, you nurture the grievance. You rehearse the arguments you wish you had made. You water the bitter root of resentment with a steady drip of memory and self-pity. You may say with your mouth that you forgive them. You may even go through the motions of reconciliation, but inside you are a judge who has passed a guilty verdict, and you refuse to commute the sentence. You hold the debt over their head, even if only in the privacy of your own mind. This feels justified. It feels like a form of self-protection. It feels like you are simply honoring the truth of the wrong that was done. But this unforgiveness is a chain, and while you may think you have wrapped it around the neck of your offender, you will find in the end that it is wrapped around your own. It is a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die. This unforgiving heart is a spiritual cancer. It metastasizes, slowly turning a soft heart into stone. It closes you off to joy, to peace. And most critically, it blocks the flow of grace in your own life. It is perhaps the most direct contradiction to the very nature of the God you claim to follow. Jesus tells a parable that is so stark, so terrifying in its implications, that we often rush past it. A king decides to settle accounts with his servants. One is brought to him who owes an astronomical sum, 10,000 talents, an unpayable debt. It was more than the entire tax revenue of a large province. It was meant to signify an infinite debt. The servant begs for mercy, and the king, moved with compassion, does something shocking. He doesn't just restructure the loan, he cancels it entirely. He forgives the infinite debt. Now, imagine the feeling, the crushing weight of a lifetime of debt lifted in an instant. The freedom, the relief, the overwhelming gratitude. This servant walks out of the king's presence a free man. And what does he do? He immediately finds a fellow servant who owes him a tiny piddling amount, 100 denarii, a few months' wages. A debt that was utterly insignificant compared to the one he was just forgiven. And he grabs this man, chokes him, and demands to be paid back. He shows no mercy. He throws the man in prison. When the king hears of this, his compassion turns to fury. He calls the servant wicked. "I cancelled all that debt of yours because you begged me to," the king says. "Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" And he hands the unforgiving servant over to be tortured until he could pay back all he owed, which we know is an impossibility. This parable is the X-ray of the unforgiving heart. We are all the first servant. We all stand before God with an unpayable, infinite debt of our failings, our selfishness, our brokenness. And through the cross, through the mystery of grace, the King has looked at us with compassion and has cancelled our debt completely. He has wiped the slate clean. To receive this infinite gift, to be bathed in this ocean of mercy, and then to turn to our brother or sister and demand payment for their small offense against us, is not just hypocritical. It is a fundamental declaration that we have not truly understood or internalized the grace we ourselves have received. It is to say, the King's grace was for me, but my neighbor deserves my justice. Holding on to unforgiveness is like being pulled from the ocean, only to then try and drown someone in a teacup. It is a spiritual absurdity. It proves that the reality of the King's mercy has not yet penetrated our own hearts. It remains an intellectual concept, not a soul-altering reality. And notice the consequence. The King's forgiveness is, in a sense, revoked. The servant's unforgiveness towards his fellow has cut him off from the very source of the grace he was given. This is not God being petty. This is a spiritual law. A heart that is clogged with the sludge of bitterness and resentment cannot be a channel for the pure, living water of divine grace. You cannot receive freely what you refuse to give freely. Forgiveness is not a feeling. It is a choice. It is an act of the will, often performed in defiance of our emotions. It is not condoning the wrong. It is not forgetting the pain. It is not necessarily reconciling with the person who harmed you. It is simply making the choice to cancel the debt, to release the person from your judgment, and to hand them over to God, who is the only righteous judge. And here is the paradox: the prisoner you set free is yourself. You let go of the chain, you stop drinking the poison. You allow the hardened, calcified ground of your heart to be broken open, so that the grace you have received from the King can finally flow through you, washing you clean and making you a conduit of that same mercy to a broken world. Look into your own heart. Is there a hidden room where you are holding someone prisoner? Is there a debt you are refusing to cancel? The King is waiting. Your own freedom is waiting. The price is the one thing you feel you cannot give: mercy. And it is the one thing that will unlock the fullness of the peace and freedom you have been searching for. We have walked a long and perhaps unsettling road together. We have stood before the glass fortress of certainty and felt the freedom of its shattering. We have fled the dizzying hall of spiritual comparison and found our own unique path in the woods. We have stood in awe of a grace so powerful, it does not just pardon, but resurrects. We have found our voice in the holy darkness of lament, and we have felt the heavy chain of unforgiveness fall away. These 5 small sins, they are not a checklist for a wrathful God. Can you see that now? They have never been about earning or losing your salvation. They are about the health of your soul. They are about the quality of your connection to the divine. They are the subtle misalignments that, over time, cause a deep and painful ache, a sense of distance, a loss of vitality. The journey to a deeper faith is not, as we so often think, a journey of addition, adding more discipline, more knowledge, more activity. It is a journey of subtraction, of letting go. Letting go of the need to be right, letting go of the need to measure up, letting go of a cheapened grace and embracing a transformative one, letting go of the mask of positivity to reveal the face of our honest pain, letting go of the debts we hold against others so that we can be free. This path is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming honest. It is not about becoming invulnerable. It is about becoming tender, hearted again. The God revealed in these ancient stories is not a distant accountant, tallying your sins. He is the father running down the road to meet his lost son. He is the landowner paying with scandalous generosity. He is the king who cancels an infinite debt. He is the friend who sits with you in the ashes. He is the presence that meets you not in your certainty, but in your wrestling. If you feel that quiet hollowness, that secret dread we spoke of at the beginning, do not despair. It is not the sign of a dying faith. It is the symptom of a faith that is longing to be set free. It is the cry of your soul for something more real, more authentic, more gracious than what you have known. It is an invitation to step out of the fortress, out of the hall of mirrors, and into the wild, mysterious, and beautiful landscape of a living relationship with God. A relationship where your questions are as welcome as your praise, your tears are as sacred as your joy, and your deepest wounds become the very places where the light of grace can shine through most brightly. The silence no longer needs to be one of dread. It can become one of peace. The peace of being fully known and fully, impossibly loved.